Evolution of Economic Systems, a Historical Analysis by Country and Theory, South Korea. South Korea Group 4. Kevin Conley, Giannath Sumanu, Bessie Menegas, Verna Cannon, and Arnold Morell. Houston Christian University, Econ 6353, Global Economy Institutions with Professor Lopez. This presentation is to discuss and outline the economic systems of South Korea and its historic and current economic situation as relates to the world today. The Korean Civil War, fought between the North and South from 1950 to 1953, remains as the most decisive event in modern Korean history, shaping the distinct identities of the two countries as we know them today. In recent years, South Korea has become a technological powerhouse and has firmly joined the world economy as a first world nation. Furthermore, it has a vibrant economy affected by recent political difficulties and with a backdrop of military conflict always on the mind of the world. In the late Joseon dynasty, Korea's economy was largely agrarian, with most people engaged in rice farming under a rigid Confucian hierarchy. Economic activity was constrained by heavy taxation, corruption, and a lack of innovation, which led to stagnation and vulnerability. When Japan annexed Korea in 1910, it introduced modern infrastructure such as railways and factories, but these developments were designed to serve Japanese imperial interests. Korean labor and resources were exploited, and local industries were suppressed or redirected to support Japan's war efforts, joining the Allies and fighting against Germany and invading China. While some industrial foundations were laid, they did not benefit the Korean population equitably. The colonial period left Korea with a dual legacy: physical infrastructure and deep economic inequality. These conditions set the stage for the challenge Korea would face after liberation. Following liberation in 1945 and the devastation of the Korean War, South Korea was one of the poorest nations in the world. However, through strategic government-led planning and foreign aid, especially from the United States, the country embarked on a rapid industrialization path. The state adopted a guided capitalist model, promoting export-oriented growth and nurturing large family-owned conglomerates known as chaebols. These firms, like Samsung and Hyundai, became engines of innovation and global competitiveness. By the 1980s, South Korea had transformed into a newly industrialized economy, and today it stands as a leader in technology, manufacturing, and cultural exports. The government's role in steering economic policy while allowing market forces to flourish has been key to its success. South Korea's journey is a testament to resilience, strategic vision, and adaptive governance. Now we'll transition to the first of three historic economic systems. Korea's early economic identity was deeply rooted in its agrarian traditions, shaped by its descent from Tungusic tribes and centuries of Chinese and Mongolian influence. Unified under the Yi dynasty in 1392, the Joseon dynasty established a Confucian bureaucracy that prioritized moral order and social hierarchy over economic innovation. The economy revolved around subsistence farming, with over 80% of the population engaged in agriculture. Taxation was collected in kind, typically rice or textiles rather than currency, and there were no formal banking or industrial sectors. Korea's formal relations were minimal, limited to tribute missions to China, reinforcing its nickname as the Hermit Kingdom. This isolationist stance preserved cultural integrity but hindered economic diversification and modernization, leaving the nation vulnerable to external pressures and internal stagnation. During the Yi dynasty, 1392 to late 1800s, Korea's economy was shaped by a rigid Confucian social hierarchy. The Yangban elite controlled land and wealth, while peasants and craftsmen formed the economic base with little opportunity for upward mobility. Access to civil service roles, often through bribery or patronage, was the only path to advancement. Commerce was tightly regulated, and merchants were viewed with suspicion, limiting the growth of a market economy. Economic production focused on extracting surplus for elite consumption with minimal reinvestment in productivity. Land ownership was concentrated in less than 10% of the population, and the merchant class remained under 5%. Confucian restraint suppressed entrepreneurial activity, resulting in stagnant GDP and trade volume. This structure preserved social order but hindered innovation and economic dynamism. Between 1876 and 1910, Korea underwent a dramatic shift from isolation to foreign domination. Japan forced Korea to sign a trade treaty in 1876, opening its ports and triggering a wave of Western influence in the 1880s. This led to the emergence of a merchant and manufacturing class, but political instability plagued the Yi dynasty, weakened by internal stagnation and external pressures. Japan's victory in the Russo-Japanese War in 1905 positioned it as Korea's protectorate, culminating in full annexation by 1910. Trade volume increased and infrastructure projects like railroads and ports began under Japanese direction. However, GDP per capita remained low and economic benefits were unevenly distributed, favoring Japanese interests. This period marked the end of Korea's dynastic sovereignty and the beginning of colonial exploitation. The transition from the late Joseon dynasty to Japanese colonial period was abrupt. In 1910, Japan took control of Korea through military dominance, thus expanding their empire. When annexed, Korea's economic system was an agrarian-based economy. Japan decided to gain access to the country's land, which provided access to mainland Asia and economic resources such as coal and iron. Under Japanese colonialism, Korea's economic growth increased exponentially, moving quickly into an industrialization economic system. Korea became an extension of Japan, a supplier of labor and raw materials. Korean officials were replaced by members of the Japanese Empire, and agricultural reforms were implemented. The Land Survey of 1910 to 1918 was the beginning of agricultural change. Japan transferred agricultural land from Koreans to Japanese individuals and institutions. This hindered Koreans from profiting from the very crops they were farming. Japan also introduced more efficient farming techniques to increase productivity. Additionally, they focused on certain crops like cotton, potatoes, and rice. Rice was the largest agricultural output in value, accounting for 40% of it almost every year, with a peak of 54% occurring in 1934. The infrastructure and industrial growth changes drove the transition to an industrialized economic system. Japan expanded the railways, added roads, and built up ports. In addition to that, they focused on developing cities, which acted as hubs for industry. The introduction of more advanced communication networks enabled Japan to expand its reach across Asia. Mining and manufacturing raw materials aided production of supplies and increased technology and power supply for Japanese companies and military. The transition from the Japanese colonial period was mandatory due to Japan's defeat in World War II. This defeat aided Korea in regaining its independence in 1945. At the time, Korea was the second most industrialized nation in Asia, only second to Japan. While the economy did thrive and develop, Japan benefited from it all. Japan owned 85% of it in Korea, and the country had been heavily exploited. In 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, and the U.S. intervened to stop the spread of communism and provide support. After the war, South Korea's economy started to look like Japan's pre-World War II Zaibatsu system. In this system, political power supported big businesses, and in Korea, large family-run groups called chaebol rose to dominate the economy again. The government worked closely with these businesses to drive industrial growth. Unlike the Japanese Zaibatsu, the chaebol did not own their banks, which gave the government more control over financing. From 1953 to 1960, South Korea's economy grew at a steady annual rate of about 3%. In 1962, the government created the Economic Planning Board, which introduced the country's first detailed 5-year economic development plan. This plan marked the beginning of efforts to build a strong, self-sufficient industrial base. It focused on modernizing the economy, creating jobs, and reducing dependence on foreign aid. Over time, South Korea implemented a total of 7 5-year plans to guide its rapid economic growth. South Korea's second 5-year plan, from 1967 to 1971, focused on modernizing its industrial base and building up import substitution industries to reduce reliance on foreign goods. The third 5-year plan, from 1972 to 1976, shifted gears and pushed for rapid growth in export-oriented industries, especially heavy and chemical sectors. This marked a major turning point in Korea's industrial strategy. The fourth 5-year plan, from 1977 to 1981, aimed to make Korean industries more competitive in the global export market. Each plan built on the last, moving the country closer to becoming an advanced industrial economy. The fifth 5-year plan, from 1982 to 1986, marked a shift from heavy and chemical industries to technology-based industries, especially electronics. The sixth plan, from 1987 to 1991, continued this focus but placed even more emphasis on expanding the tech sector. South Korea aimed to strengthen its global competitiveness in emerging technologies. The seventh plan, from 1992 to 1996, expanded into high-tech fields like bioengineering, advanced materials, and aerospace. It also focused on balancing economic development across different regions of the country. South Korea is the 13th largest economy in the world with a GDP of 1.8 trillion in 2024. Its growth is powered by a strong export-driven model led by high-tech industries like electronics and automobiles. The country is also investing heavily in green technologies and digital innovation through national programs like the Korean New Deal. With well-developed infrastructure, a skilled workforce, and 18 active free trade agreements, South Korea has become a major hub for global trade and investment. Its stable economy and forward-looking policies continue to attract business from around the world. In the early governance of Korea, Confucianism played a crucial role as the foundation of society. The government placed strong emphasis on strict hierarchy, moral duty, and social harmony, all of which had a profound impact on political structures and daily life. Due to the prioritization of moral order over innovation, Korea adopted a closed-off approach to the outside world, leading to policies that discouraged foreign trade and limited exposure to global markets. This approach resulted in slowed economic growth and hindered technological advancement. The isolation eventually gave way to external pressures such as Japanese colonization from 1910 to 1945, which disrupted traditional systems and imposed harsh economic changes. As of the year 2024, South Korea has established itself as the 13th largest global economy, boasting strong sectors in electronics, automotive, green technology, and digital innovation. The government of South Korea remains crucial in key areas including infrastructure, development, education, and the shaping of global trade strategy. The economic growth of South Korea can be credited to its dedication to long-term planning, focus on exports, and successful collaboration between the public and private sectors. As the economy matures, how will the government adapt its role? Less central planning or continued strategic direction? How will it respond to challenges like an aging population, rising youth unemployment, and inequality? Can South Korea remain globally competitive while transitioning to a green and digital economy? These questions not only reflect the current state of South Korea's economic and social landscape, but also emphasize the importance of developing clear, strategic answers to ensure a resilient and prosperous future. South Korea is currently facing a critical economic crossroads, which raises important questions about its future trajectory. One key aspect to consider is the evolving role of the government and whether it will shift away from central planning or maintain strategic oversight, as this will significantly impact the country's adaptability. Additionally, addressing pressing challenges such as an aging population, youth unemployment, and growing inequality is crucial for sustaining long-term social and economic stability. Furthermore, South Korea's ability to remain globally competitive during its transition to a green and digital economy will determine its relevance on the world stage. References